Hi, this is Kevin B, and now I'm going over my vocabulary word for sensation and perception. So this is my vocabulary word wall. Okay, so first, sensation is like the process by which our sensory receptors and neural system receive and represent stimulus energies from our environment. Like we can sense those, like touch, smell, visual, taste, and hearing process. And section is perception, though it's like the process of organizing and interpreting sensory information. It can enable us to like recognize different things and events in our society. Like we know this one is like from this man's perception is like 6, from this one is like 9. And bottom up processing is like to analyze that begins the sensory receptors and works up to the brain's integration of sensory information. So basically, you see something, and this visual information is sent to the brain, and your brain is going to process it. Next one is selected attention. It's like the focusing of conscious awareness on a particular stimulus. Like this is an experience like talking about when the participants are focusing on people passing the ball, but ignore those are chimpanzee character inside this picture. And next one is top-down processing. It's like information processing guided by higher level mental processes, as when we construct perceptions drawing on our experience and expectations. So basically, your brain have a general concept about the things that you saw or you see, so it helps you to recognize. And the attentional blindness is that failing to see visible objects when our attention is directed elsewhere. So like if our attention is directed by elsewhere, we cannot focus on the other stuff. Next one, transduction, is a conversion of one form of energy to another. Basically, like, in sensation, the transforming of stimulus energies, such as sounds or smells or sights, will transfer into neural impulses and send it to our brain, and we can interpret it. And next one is psychophysics. It's the study of relationships between the physical characteristics of stimuli, such as their intensity, and our psychological experience of them. Absolute threshold is the minimum stimulation needed to detect a particular stimulus 50% of the time. So basically, this point is a threshold point. Threshold basically means that it's the minimum value that we can see a thing or we can sense a thing. And signal detection theory is a theory predicting how and when we detect the presence of a faint stimuli or a signal amid background stimulation or noise. Assumes there's no single absolute threshold, and that detection depends partly on a person's experience, expectations, motivation, and alternatives. And subliminal is like below one's absolute threshold for conscious awareness. And change blindness, failing to notice changes in the environment. Like those pictures are kind of different. And next one, difference threshold, the minimum difference between two stimuli required for detection 50% of the time, also called the just noticeable difference. So on the left side is an old kind of Coca-Cola, but the next on the right side is a new one. So it's like the minimum value that we will notice the difference between two items. And Weber's law is like the principle that to be perceived as different two stimuli must differ by a constant percentage. And also like sensory adaptation, it's like diminished sensitivity as a consequence of constant stimulation. And perceptual set is a mental predisposition to perceive one thing and not the other. So this picture we can see like, no, this is kind of like a rabbit, but if we change the way to look at it, it might be a duck. And parapsychology is the study of paranormal phenomena, including ESP and psychokinesis. Extrasensory perception, standard for ESP, is like the controversial claim that perception can occur apart from sensory input, includes telepathy, those kind of superpower we saw in movies. And wavelengths. Wavelength is the distance from the peak and of one light or sound wave to the peak of the next. So electromagnetic wavelengths vary from the short bleeps of cosmic rays to the long pulses of radio transmission. So wavelengths basically like from top of one to the other one. And hue is the dimension of color that is determined by the wavelength of light, what we know as the color names blue, green, and so on. And intensity, the amount of energy in the light or sound wave which we perceive as brightness or loudness, as determined by the wave amplitude. Pupil, the adjustable opening in the center of the eye through which light enters. Iris, a ring of muscle tissue that forms the color portion of the eye around the pupil and controls the size of the pupil opening. Lenses, the transparent structure behind the pupil and that changes shape help focus images on the retina. Retina, the light-sensitive inner surface of the eye containing the receptor rods and cones, plus layer of neurons that begin the processing of visual information. So it's like the back of the eye. Rods, which refers to this, is a retinal receptor that detect white, and gray, necessary for peripheral and twilight vision when the constant doesn't respond. And cons, like this. Retinal receptor cells that are concentrated near the center of the retina and that function in daylight or in well-lit conditions. This detect fine detail and give rise to color sensation. So basically like red, green, blue, those kind of stuff. Optic nerve means that the nerve that carries neural impulses from the eye to the brain. Accommodation, the process by which the eye's lens changes to shape to focus near or far objects on the retina. Blind spot is the point at which the optic nerve leaves the eye and no receptor cells are located there. So basically at this point we cannot see the things. Fovea, the central focal point in the retina around which the eye's cones cluster. So on the fovea, there's so many different amounts of cones, and so that we can see clearly, like the image at fovea is the most clearest thing in our eye. Feature detectors, nerve cells in the brain that respond to specific features of the stimuli such as shape, angle, or movement. So in our heads there are feature detectors that help us to detect the shape or identify the shape, color, or any other movement. Young-Hamel trichromatic theory, the theory that retina contains three different color receptors, one to blue, which means stimulate in combination, can produce the perception of any color. So basically, the main theory is that the cones is responsible for only three kind of color: blue, green, red. Another theory is that opponent process theory, the theory that opposing retinal processes red to green, yellow to blue, white to black enable color vision. For example, some cells are stimulated by green and inhibited by red. Others are stimulated by red and inhibited by green. So it basically like connects two types color as appear. And parallel processing, the processing of many aspects of a problem simultaneously, the brain's natural mode of information processing for many functions, including vision, contrast with the step-by-step processing of most computers and of conscious problem solving. So that basically means we human see things and our brain interpret things by looking at different things at the same time, like the color, motion, form, depth. We saw those things at the same time, and we can combine those together, and we got a perception. So Gestalt is an organized whole. This type of psychologists emphasize our tendency to integrate pieces of information into meaningful wholes. So basically, we can see a triangle here, but there's actually no triangle here. Figure ground, the organization of visual field into objects or the figures that stand out from their surrounding, the ground. Like this is basically a tree by looking at the black stuff and some birds. However, if you look at the background, like the white stuff, there's a lion and a chimpanzee right here. Grouping, the perceptual tendency to organize stimuli into covert groups. So basically, according to the color, we human tend to put things with similar color together. Depth perception, the ability to see objects in 3 dimensions, although the images that strike the retina are 2-dimensional, allows us to judge distance. The visual cliff is a laboratory experience. It's for testing depth perception in infants and young animals. Babies will be afraid of those visual dangers. So we can conclude that we have depth perception long ago, as soon as we are born. Binocular cues is a depth cue such as retinal disparity that depend on the use of 2 eyes. So we thought we see things using our 2 eyes, but if you focus on the things near you, you will see 2 things far away from you. But if you focus on the things far away from you, you will then see 2 near things. Audition is the sense of or act of hearing. And retinal disparity is a binocular cue for perceiving depth by comparing images from the retina into 2 eyes. The brain computes distance. The greater the disparity or the difference between the 2 images, the closer the object. Monocular cues, depth cues such as interposition and linear perspective, available to either eye alone. 5 phenomenon, an illusion of movement created when 2 or more adjacent lights blink on and off in quick succession. Perceptual constancy, perceiving objects as unchanging, having constant shapes, size, lightness, and color, even as illumination and retinal images change. Basically, like the door is the door, doesn't change. Color constancy, perceiving familiar objects as having constant color, even if changing illumination alters the wavelengths reflected by the object. So if an object changes color, but that object is still that object, so it doesn't change. Perceptual adaptation, in vision, the ability to adjust to an artificially displaced or even inverted visual field. Frequency, the number of complete wavelengths that pass a point in a given time, for example, per second. So it's like the distance. Now this is low frequency, and this is the high frequency. Pitch, tones experience highness or lowest, depends on frequency. Middle ear, on the chamber between the eardrum and cochlea, containing 3 tiny bones, hammer, avian, and stirrup, that concentrate the vibrations of the eardrum on the cochlea's oval window. So basically, this part. So okay, cochlea, a coiled bony fluid-filled tube in the inner ear through which sound waves trigger nerve impulses. Inner ear, the innermost part of the ear containing the cochlea, semicircular canals, and vestibular sacs. Sensory neuron hearing loss. Hearing loss caused by damage to cochlea receptor cells. So basically like the sensory neurons are damaged. This cannot be treated since the neuron got hurt. Conduction hearing loss. Having loss caused by damage to the mechanical system that conducts sounds waves to the cochlea. So basically this is like the physical hurt. Cochlear implant, device for converting sounds into electrical signals and stimulation the auditory nerve through electrode threaded into cochlea. It's like artificial devices help you to hear again. And plate theory. In hearing, the theory that links the pitch we hear with the place where the cochlea's membrane is stimulated. Frequency theory. In hearing, the theory that the rate of nerve impulses in traveling up the auditory nerve matches the frequency of the tone, thus enable us to sense its pitch. Gate control theory. The theory that the spinal cord contains a neurological gate that blocks pain signals or allows them to pass on to the brain. The gate is opened by the activity of pain signals traveling up small nerve fibers and is closed by activity in larger fibers or by information coming from the brain. So basically like if I hurt my wrist and if I also broke my leg, so the pain of broken my leg is greater than the pain of my hurting my wrist, so I could only feel the pain that I broke my leg. Kinesthesia, the system for sensing the position and movement of individual body parts. So if you close your eyes, you can also feel like your arm is moving. And vestibular sense, the sense of body movement and position, including the sense of balance. Sensory interaction, the principle that one sense may influence another, as when the smell of food influences taste. Priming, the activation, often unconsciously, of certain associations, thus predisposing one's perception, memory, or response. Embodied cognition. In psychological science, the influence of bodily sensations, gestures, and other states on cognitive preference and judgment. So basically, we combine our cognition objects together. Those things involved in cognition, we combine those together to have a perception or sensation.